This will be a quick introduction into visual prosthetics. We will look into what is a visual prosthetic, how does a visual prosthetic work, and how will a patient see. A visual prosthetic is actually a system of devices that aims at restoring sight to a blind patient. Most of them consist of an implant, some sort of power source, a computer, and an external camera. Now, before we can get into how this would actually work, we need to cover a little bit of basic anatomy. Now, the anatomy of the nervous system is very complex, but we're just going to cover the basic parts that you'll need to know for this presentation. Now, the basic parts of the visual system are, of course, the eyes, the optic nerves, which is a bundle of nerve fibers that come out of the back of the eyes, the optic tract, which is how all of these nerves are brought into the brain, and the visual cortex, which is the back part of the brain. Now, the retina is a layer in the eye that has the rods and the cones. It's what takes light and turns it into an electrical signal that is then transferred through the optic nerve to the brain. And the visual cortex is the very back part of the brain. Now, it's what takes these electrical signals and it transforms it into an image. And these images are what we see every day. So, how exactly would one of these visual prosthetics work? Well, the basic idea is that if you can inject an electrical signal somewhere in the visual system, then you can induce artificial vision. Now, retinal implants are implants directly on the retina, and that's where the electrical signal gets injected. Cortical implants are an implant on the back of the brain, and it injects the electrical signal directly into the visual cortex. Now, there's pros and cons to each of these methods. In general, though, retinal implants are easier and safer to implement. However, they only work with a certain number of patients that have a very specific range of retinal diseases. Cortical implants, on the other hand, would work for all blind patients. However, it is brain surgery, which is inherently more risky. When we inject these electrical signals into the patient's brain, it will cause them to see something called a phosphene, which is like a little point of light. Now, we can control where this point of light is and how bright it is depending on where we inject our electrical signal and how much electricity we put in. Now, using this, we can actually create what's called a phosphene map, which is what you're seeing on the bottom of the screen here, which is kind of like a low-resolution, light-intensity image. It's not great vision, but it is better than no vision. Now, one type of visual prosthetic that's currently in development is called the Argus II. It consists of an implant on the retina. You can see this in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And it also has some external components. You can see a patient on the right-hand side here wearing this system. He has a video camera mounted on glasses. He has a computer that he's wearing around his neck that transforms the images from the camera into something that can be sent to the implant. And then there's an external coil that wirelessly sends data to this implant. Now, this implant only has 60 electrodes, which essentially means it can only create 60 spots of light, or like 60 pixels in the patient's vision, which isn't great. However, this particular implant is extremely easy, well, relatively easy to surgically implant. It involves the same procedure that a surgeon would use to fix a detached retina, which is a relatively common procedure. So, this device, even though it isn't great, it is something that is very viable. However, that being said, it's only useful for patients that have an intact retina. The Alpha IMS is another type of retinal implant. Now, it has internal photodiodes, and it's meant to replace the photocells of the retina. Now, because of this, it doesn't need an external camera. It literally just replaces the function of a layer of cells. And it has a higher resolution than the Argus II at 1500 pixels, which is great. However, it only works for patients that have a specific type of photocell degeneration, and the surgery is very difficult. Now, here at the University of Utah, there's been a microchip developed that can be implanted on the brain. It's called the Utah Electrode Array. Now, this has already been used with quadriplegic patients in order to control artificial limbs, and in theory, it could be used as a cortical prosthetic. Now, it's very small. You can see on the picture in the bottom of the screen of one of them actually implanted on the brain, and you would need many of them implanted on the brain in order to give a good vision to the patient. That being said, with many implanted, you could potentially give them a near full field of vision, which is much better than any of the prosthetics currently under development. And on top of that, it would work for all patients, not just those with very specific retinal diseases. But, that being said, it's still very early in the research stage of development. In conclusion, a visual prosthetic is a system that can restore some level of vision to a patient. The way that they work is by injecting electrical signals into the visual system to induce artificial vision. And a patient will be able to see a low-resolution, light-intensity image. Now, are we on the cusp of curing blindness forever? The answer is maybe. In the next 10 to 20 years, we most likely will have a working system. But right now, the level of vision that's restored is less than optimal. Patients that have been implanted with retinal systems have been able to navigate around a room with mannequins, read large letters, and recognize facial features, but it's a far cry from the vision that we have in our everyday life.